She was handed a garbage bag on her 18th birthday. Not a gift, not a cake, not even a handshake. A black plastic bag with 3 changes of clothes, a worn paperback, a toothbrush, and a photograph of her mother in a cheap plastic frame. That was it. 10 years inside the system. And that was everything she had to show for it. The woman who handed it to her didn't meet her eyes, just patted her arm once, the kind of pat you give a stranger, and said the words Maya had been dreading since she was old enough to understand what they meant. "You're an adult now. Good luck." The door clicked shut behind her, and Maya Calloway stood on those cracked concrete steps with a garbage bag on her shoulder and $250 in a manila envelope, and she understood for the first time with absolute clarity that no one was coming. Not ever. But there was something else in that envelope. A letter. From a law firm she'd never heard of. About an inheritance she didn't know existed, from a grandfather the state had told her was dead. She looked down the street toward the bus station. Then she looked at the letter. One was the path they built for her. The other was a door she didn't know was there. She picked up her bag, and she walked toward the door. Maya Calloway stood in the doorway of the group home on Delancey Street and watched Colette Vane set the bag down on the floor between them like it was a perfectly normal thing to do. Colette was 40-something, efficient, wearing a lanyard with a photo ID that had yellowed at the edges. She always smelled faintly of hand sanitizer and burnt coffee. She had done this before, many times. You could tell by the way her face stayed so carefully neutral, the way her eyes found a point just above Maya's left shoulder and stayed there. Professional distance. That's what they called it in the system. Maya had another name for it. The manila envelope came next. Thick. Official. Colette placed it on top of the bag like a bow on a present, except it wasn't a present. It was a balance sheet. Final accounting. The sum total of what the state owed one Maya Calloway upon termination of care. $250. A birth certificate. A social security card. And an appointment card for a job placement office on West 34th that Maya already knew she would never use. "This is everything," Colette said, still not meeting her eyes. Maya looked at the bag, then at the envelope, then at the door behind Colette, the hallway beyond it, the staircase she had walked up and down for 4 years, the scuffed yellow walls she knew better than her own reflection. "Okay," Maya said. Just that. Okay. Because what else was there? Because she had learned a long time ago that the words she actually wanted to say never went anywhere useful. Because she was 18 years old, and she had been practicing this moment in her head for months, and she still had no idea what her face was supposed to do. Colette patted her arm once. Quick. The way you pat a surface to check if it's dry. "Good luck, Maya." The door clicked shut. And that was it. 10 years. One plastic bag. She stood on the front steps for a full minute without moving. The September air was sharp. Too cold for the season. The kind of cold that gets into your collar and stays there. The street was doing its regular morning thing. A bus exhaled at the corner. A man walked a dog that ignored him entirely. 2 kids in school uniforms argued about something that seemed very important to them and completely weightless to the rest of the world. Nobody looked at her. She was already invisible. Already erased. Which was fine. Which was something she was used to. Which was definitely, absolutely, completely fine. She picked up the bag, looped the envelope under her arm, and stood there one more second because she was not in a hurry to start the rest of her life. The rest of her life was a bus shelter and a job placement office and a shelter bed and a series of choices that all led to the same narrow corridor. She knew what that corridor looked like. She had been staring down it for years. Then she noticed the letter. She had felt it earlier when she first opened the envelope. A single folded sheet, different paper than the official documents. Heavier, cream-colored. She had assumed it was more paperwork. Some final bureaucratic farewell. Terms and conditions of being released into the wild. But now she unfolded it and read it properly for the first time. And the world did a small, quiet tectonic shift. The letterhead said Finch and Associates. An address on the 34th floor of a building on Park Avenue South. And the letter in careful formal language that was clearly trying very hard not to seem dramatic informed one Maya Calloway that she was the sole heir of one Edmund Harlow deceased, and that there was a matter of inheritance to be discussed at her earliest convenience. Inheritance. She read the word 3 times. People like her did not inherit things. People like her inherited debt and instability, and a very particular kind of exhaustion that settled into your bones before you were old enough to name it. People like her did not receive letters on cream-colored paper with law firm letterheads. And yet, here it was, in her hand. Real. She looked down the street toward the bus station. 2 blocks east. She had the address memorized. She knew the route to the shelter from there. She knew exactly how this day was supposed to go. Then she looked at the letter again. The building was 10 blocks in the other direction. She thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. Then she picked up her garbage bag and walked west, not because she had hope. She was too experienced for hope, but because she had spent 10 years being told where to go and what to do and how to feel about it. Because this was the first morning in a decade that nobody was giving her instructions. Because if she was going to walk into the worst day of her life, she was going to do it on her own terms. Even if those terms were just not that way. The walk was longer than she expected. The bag got heavier with each block. Her shoulder ached. She passed coffee shops she couldn't afford, and dry cleaners that had been there since before she was born, and a florist with buckets of orange chrysanthemums on the sidewalk that smelled overwhelming and a little like grief. The building was glass and steel and taller than felt reasonable. The lobby was marble. The kind of marble that's not trying to impress you. The kind that just expects you to already be impressed. The security guard looked at her bag, then at her, then at her bag again. Delivery entrance is around back, he said. I have an appointment, y'all, she said. She showed him the letter. He read it. Something shifted in his posture. Not warmth exactly, just the absence of dismissal. 34th floor, he said. The elevator was mirrored, all 4 walls, which meant no matter which direction she looked, she saw herself. Girl with a garbage bag. Girl in jeans with a fraying hem. Girl whose hair needed a cut and whose eyes were doing that thing they did when she was trying very hard not to feel whatever she was feeling. She looked away from herself. The doors opened. The carpet out here was thick. The kind your feet sink into. The receptionist had perfect posture and a headset that made her look like she was managing air traffic. She looked up when Maya stepped out of the elevator and did the thing people always did. The quick assessment. The recalibration. Maya put the letter on the desk before the woman could say anything. The receptionist read it, typed something, looked up with a different expression than the one she'd started with. Mr. Finch is expecting you. Please have a seat. The couch was leather, soft in a way that felt almost apologetic. Maya sat on the edge of it, put the garbage bag on the floor between her feet, looked at the art on the walls, which was the kind of art that costs a lot and communicates very little. She waited, and then the door opened. He was older than she expected, late 60s. A suit that had been good once and was now just comfortable. Thinning hair, thick glasses, the walk of a man whose knees had been disagreeing with him for years. He looked tired. Not the tired of someone who had a bad night. The tired of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and was finally maybe putting it down. Miss Calloway, he said. Maya, she said. Arthur Finch. He held the door open. Please come in. His office was the opposite of the lobby. Books everywhere. Stacked on shelves, stacked on chairs, stacked in places that weren't designed for stacking. Maps on the walls. Old ones. Places with names she didn't recognize. The whole room smelled like paper and leather and something earthy she couldn't identify. It felt bizarrely like a place someone actually lived in. She sat in the armchair across from his desk. He sat across from her, looked at her over his glasses for a moment in a way that felt like he was checking something against a mental image he'd been carrying for years. Then he opened a folder on his desk. "I'll be direct," he said. "I was your grandfather's lawyer, and his friend, for a very long time." The word landed between them like something dropped. Grandfather. Maya's whole body went still. "I don't have a grandfather," she said. And her voice was completely level. She had practiced being level for years. "The system said I had no living relatives. My mother's parents were both deceased." "That is what the records indicated," Arthur said carefully. "What does that mean?" "It means the records were not entirely accurate." She looked at him. "His name was Edmund Harlow," Arthur said. "He was your mother's father. He passed away 8 weeks ago." 8 weeks. So he had existed. Right up until 8 weeks ago. A grandfather. Alive. Somewhere. While she was in a group home on Delancey Street being handed a garbage bag and a $250 check and a pat on the arm. "Why?" she said. Just that. Not a full question. Because there were too many questions inside that word and she didn't know which one to start with. "He and your mother were estranged," Arthur said. "For reasons I'll explain. When she passed, the state made inquiries. Edmund chose not to come forward." Chose. The word was small and it hit like something blunt. "He chose," Maya said. "Yes." "He knew about me." "Yes." "He knew I was in the system." Arthur took his glasses off, rubbed his eyes, put them back on. "Yes, Maya. He knew." She sat with that for a moment. The leather chair was very soft. The room was very quiet. Outside the window, 34 floors down the city was making all its usual noise, but up here none of it reached. She was not going to cry. She was not going to cry in the office of a man she had known for 4 minutes. She was not going to give this situation the satisfaction. "So why am I here?" she said. Arthur pushed a folder across the desk. "Because he left you something." She opened the folder. Legal language. Dense. But certain words rose to the surface immediately. Property. Deed. Millhaven. "He left you his workshop," Arthur said. "A parcel of land in Millhaven, New York. Single structure, about 5 hours north of the city." She stared at the document. A workshop. Not money. Not a letter of apology. Not even a name she could have used 10 years ago when she was 8 years old and the state was deciding her future. A workshop. "There are complications," Arthur said. Because of course there were. "The property has outstanding back taxes. Roughly $9,000. There is also a development company that has been attempting to acquire the land. Crestline Development. They've been circling for years." He paused. "The tax debt comes due in 90 days. She looked up from the folder. "So I'd inherit a building and a debt." "Yes." "And if I can't pay the taxes, the county seizes the property. It will almost certainly go to Crestline. And if I just walk away, don't claim it, same outcome." She leaned back, looked at the ceiling. There was a water stain in one corner shaped vaguely like a question mark, which felt like the universe having a very small sense of humor. "So the choices are," most, she said, "nothing. Or less than nothing. There is a third option." Arthur reached into his desk drawer and placed something on the desk between them. A $10 bill. She stared at it. "The estate is technically insolvent," he said. "But we can structure a nominal sale. You purchased the property from the estate before it's seized. The deed transfers to you. So do the debts. But it's yours. For $10. For $10. She looked at the bill. Old. Soft at the edges. Like it had been in someone's drawer for a while. "Most people," Arthur said quietly, "would walk away." "What did he say?" Maya said. "About me? Did he leave a message, or just the deed?" Arthur was quiet for a moment. "He said to tell you this," he said finally. "He said sometimes the things that look like burdens are anchors, and an anchor can hold you steady, or it can pull you under. But either way, he said it is yours. She looked at the $10 bill. She thought about the bus station, the shelter, the narrow corridor. She thought about a man who had known she existed for 10 years and had sent a lawyer instead of himself, who had left her a building and a debt and a riddle about anchors. She thought about the $9,000 she did not have. She pulled her envelope out of her jacket, took out the $250 check. Then she counted the bills she had loose in the bottom of the envelope. 20s, crumpled. $43 and some change. Not enough for a $10 bill technically, because she only had a 20. I don't have change, she said. Arthur looked at her for a long moment, and then something happened to his face. Not a smile exactly. Something quieter than that. Something that looked like it had been waiting a long time to get out. I think we can manage that, he said. He opened his drawer, took out a 10, handed her back her 20, set the documents in front of her. Sign here, Miss Calloway. She picked up the pen. Her hand was steady. She didn't let it shake. She was 18 years old and she had just spent her last $43 on something she had no plan for and no ability to pay for. She was signing her name to a building she had never seen in a town she had never heard of with a debt attached to it that was larger than anything she had ever owned. She signed. Maya Calloway. Right there. On the line. Welcome to home ownership, Arthur said. She stood up, put the pen down, picked up her garbage bag. The bus to Millhaven, she said. Where does it leave from? Arthur wrote the address on a piece of paper, also drew a map, a real one freehand of the town. He was unexpectedly good at it. He included the location of the workshop, a road called Hollow Lane, and a small square he labeled Diner with an arrow. It's about a 5-hour ride, he said. The town is quiet. Very quiet. He paused. Maya, she looked back from the doorway. He wasn't a bad man, Arthur said. He made choices I disagreed with, choices I still think about. But he wasn't a bad man. She looked at him. People who aren't bad men, she said, don't usually leave their granddaughters in the foster system for 10 years. She left before he could answer. The bus terminal smelled like diesel and old food, and the specific human exhaustion of people going places they weren't sure they wanted to go. Maya bought her ticket at the counter, found her gate, and sat in a plastic chair with the garbage bag between her feet and Arthur's hand-drawn map folded into her jacket pocket. She did not think about what she had just done. She thought about what she was doing next. That was the only way she had ever survived anything. Not backward. Forwards. One thing at a time. Next thing. Then the thing after that. The bus was old. The seats were upholstered in something that had once been blue. She got a window seat, pressed her forehead against the glass as the terminal fell away, and the city opened up around her in its full, ordinary vastness. She had lived here her whole life. 8 years with her mother in an apartment in the Bronx that always smelled like Eleanor's cooking. Then 10 years moving through the system's geography. Group homes in Brooklyn. A foster placement in Queens that lasted 7 months. Back to Brooklyn. Then the group home on Delancey. She had never left the city. Not once. Not really. The bus moved north. The city thinned. The buildings shortened. The gaps between them widened. Strip malls gave way to gas stations, gave way to long stretches of nothing in particular. And then slowly the nothing became something else. Trees. Real ones, dense and dark and old. Hills that rolled away in every direction. The sky opened up in a way she hadn't known sky could open up. It was, she thought, what the word space was supposed to feel like. She didn't mean to think about Eleanor. She never meant to. It just happened sometimes, like a window blowing open. Her mother had loved the outdoors, had always talked about leaving the city someday, getting somewhere with trees, somewhere you could breathe. She had said it the way people say things when they're not sure they believe them but want to. Full of wistful energy. Full of some restless hope that never quite found a direction. She never got there. Maya pulled her jacket tighter and didn't let herself go any further with that. The bus made stops, towns that all looked the same. Post office, diner, a row of houses, a gas station. Passengers got off. Nobody much got on. By the time they were an hour from Millhaven, the bus was nearly empty. Just Maya and a man in his 60s who slept with his mouth open, and a woman reading a paperback and not looking up for anything. The sun was low. The light was going golden, and Maya, despite herself, was watching it. She had seen sunsets before, but not like this. Not with this much room around them. Not with the mountains going dark in layers, blue behind purple behind black, and the sky above them doing something complicated and beautiful that nobody had asked it to do. Something in her chest did a small thing she didn't have words for. The driver called the name of the town. Millhaven. She stood up. The bus doors wheezed open and she stepped down onto a sidewalk that was quiet in a way that city sidewalks are never quiet. No traffic. No crowds. The air was cold and clean and smelled of pine needles, and something beneath that something mineral like stone near water. The bus pulled away, and Maya stood there on the main street of Millhaven with her garbage bag and her manila envelope, and Arthur's hand-drawn map, and the most complete silence she had ever personally experienced. The town was small. One main street with old storefronts, most of them dark. A hardware store, a post office, a church whose white paint was peeling in long strips, and at the far end a diner with a neon sign in the window that said "Eat" in red letters, one letter slightly dimmer than the others. She consulted the map. Left on Mill Road. 1 mile to Hollow Lane. She walked. The streetlights gave out after 2 blocks. The road became unpaved. The trees closed in on either side, dark shapes against a sky that was just beginning to show stars. She could hear water somewhere off to her left. A river or a creek, low and steady, moving over rocks. She was not afraid of the dark. She had learned a long time ago that the dark was mostly just the absence of things. And the absence of things was frequently a relief. Hollow Lane was narrower than she expected. More of a track than a road. Gravel and weeds. Her shoes crunched with every step, and somewhere in the trees something moved and went still. And then she saw it, low and dark against the tree line. A long building. Cinder block walls. Corrugated metal roof. A wide garage door rusted shut, secured with a chain and a padlock. A smaller door on the side. And next to it, standing still against the sky, a dead tree, its branches bare and reaching like an open hand. She stood at the end of the drive and looked at it for a long moment. This was her inheritance. This was the one thing that Edmund Harlow had not managed to lose. The one thing left after the state took everything else. A building in a field at the end of a dirt road in a town she had never heard of. It was dark. It was cold. The padlock was the size of her fist. She walked up the drive. The smaller door had a standard lock. She tried the small key from the ring Arthur had given her. It turned with a sound like something that had been waiting a very long time to move. The door swung open. Cold air came out. That specific smell of a place that has been sealed for years. Oil, dust, metal, time. She turned on her phone flashlight. 10% battery. She had to be quick. The beam cut across the floor, the walls, the machines. There were a lot of machines. Enormous things, hulking and dark, covered in dust, thick as felt. She could make out the shapes of a drill press. A bandsaw. What looked like a lathe the size of a small car. Workbenches along both walls, tools laid out in rows so precise they looked deliberate, like whoever arranged them had expected to come back. In the center of the room, on a heavy steel work table, was a shape under a canvas cloth, covered with a care that stood out sharply against the dusty disorder of everything else. Like someone had put it there with intention. Like it mattered. She crossed the room and pulled the canvas back. A motorcycle frame. No fenders, no seat wiring hanging loose from the handlebars. Wheels on, but nothing else. An engine block clean despite everything mounted in the frame like heart in a chest. Not finished. Nowhere near finished. She stood there looking at it for a moment she couldn't entirely account for. Then her phone screen flickered. Warning. Battery critical. She moved fast. Back wall. A door she had almost missed. She pushed it open. Small room. Narrow cot with a thin mattress. Wooden desk. A camping stove on a crate. A mug. An ashtray full of old cigarette butts that had dried to dust. No photographs. No letters. No books. Nothing on the walls. Nothing on the desk but the mug and the ashtray. A room that had been deliberately emptied of itself. She felt the anger again. Quick and hot. This was the man. Right here. This was where he had chosen to be instead. She went back to the main room, the cabinet in the corner. Heavy metal. Latched, not locked. She braced her foot against the wall and pulled hard, and it shrieked open, and she swept the flashlight over the shelves. Cans of solvent, turpentine, oil, paint cans arranged in a row. And on the inside of the cabinet door, almost invisible hanging from a nail barely larger than a tack, a small brass key. She reached for it with steady hands. Her phone died. Total dark. She stood in it. Let it land. The darkness was complete, and the silence beneath it was complete. And for a moment she just breathed. In, out. In, out. She was fine. She was always fine. She had been fine in worse places than this. She reached into her jacket pocket and found what she always carried. A cheap plastic lighter. Not because she smoked. Just because she had always needed to feel like she had access to fire. Some small control over the dark. She flicked it once, twice. On the third try it caught. Orange light. Flickering and warm and just barely enough. She found the metal cash box on the second shelf. Heavy. Locked. She brought it to the work table, set it down next to the motorcycle skeleton, and tried the small brass key. The lock turned. She lifted the lid. And then she stopped. Stopped breathing. Stopped thinking. Stopped doing the thing where she kept herself very carefully level, because the box was full of money. Stacks of it. 20s and 50s, paper banded neat as anything. She lifted one bundle. The band was old and brittle. The bills were real. She pulled stacks out one after another and set them on the table and kept pulling, and there was more and then more and then more. She counted. $95,000. Give or take. In a metal box. In a locked cabinet. In a building that had been sealed for years. In a town she had never heard of until this morning. $95,000 left for her by a man she had never met. And at the very bottom of the box, beneath the last stack of bills, there was an envelope. Thick. Sealed. Her name written on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. Strong and slightly slanted. Pressed hard into the paper like the person writing it had meant every letter. Just her name. Maya. The lighter was burning hot against her thumb. She shifted hands. She was shaking just slightly, but she didn't think that was unreasonable given the circumstances. She broke the seal. She unfolded the pages inside, and she began to read. My dearest Maya? She stopped. Read it again. My dearest Maya. No one had ever called her that. In her whole life. Not once. Dearest. The words sitting there on the page like something that had been waiting for her for years. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. It means Arthur did as I asked. And you found your way here. I hope you did not hate him too much for his role in this. He is a good man, and he has carried his guilt like a stone in his chest for a very long time. More than he deserved. I am your grandfather, Edmund Harlow, and I owe you the truth. All of it. The flame dipped. She shielded it. Kept reading. I know what you must think of me. You think I abandoned you. You are right that I was absent. But absence and abandonment are not always the same thing, though I understand completely why they feel identical from where you are standing. Your mother Eleanor was everything to me. bright and stubborn and so full of life it was almost alarming. When she was 18, she fell into a situation I could not pull her out of. A man named Raymond Stoke, older than her, charming in the way that dangerous people often are. He had her convinced he was something other than what he was. What he was a criminal. Money laundering. Extortion. A development company called Crestline that was a clean face on very dirty money. Your mother saw something she wasn't supposed to see. A transaction. A ledger. Enough to destroy him. She came to me terrified. We were going to go to the authorities together, but Stoke found out. He came to our house, and he made it very clear what would happen to Eleanor if I did not do exactly as he said. He offered me a trade. Eleanor walks away, disappears. New name, new life, no contact with me ever again. In exchange, I sign a confession for a crime I did not commit. Embezzlement from one of Stoke's front companies. 5 years. No trial. The lighter sputtered. She tilted it. The flame climbed back. There was no choice. There was never a choice. I would have done anything. I signed the confession. I went to prison. And Eleanor ran. I never saw her again. When I got out, I came here. Millhaven. I had known this place when I was young. It was quiet. It was far enough. I bought this building. I worked. Cash jobs mostly. Welding, fabrication, engine repair. I kept my head down. I did not contact Eleanor because the condition of her safety was that I never did. I tried to believe she was all right. I had to believe it or I would not have been able to function. And then Arthur found me. He had spent years trying to locate Eleanor to tell her he was sorry that he had watched me be railroaded and had never felt right about it. He found her, but he was too late. He found her death certificate instead. And then he found you, Maya. He told me you were 8 years old and in the system and I could come forward and claim you and none of the official records would stop me. My first instinct was to get in my car. But Stoke was still out there. He was bigger now. More powerful. Crestline Development had grown into something with real resources and real reach. And if he ever discovered that Eleanor had a child, a daughter who was still alive who had her mother's blood in her, he would see you as unfinished business, as a liability, as a threat. As long as I was invisible, you were invisible too. The moment I claimed you, I drew a line between us. And a line between us was a line for him to follow. I made the hardest decision I have ever made. I let you stay in the system. I know what that cost you. I know because Arthur kept me informed as carefully as he could, and because I am not stupid and I am not naive about what that life looks like. I know about the group homes and the moves and the particular loneliness of a child who has learned not to need anyone. Every single day of the last 10 years that knowledge has been in my chest like something broken. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I am not sure I would. But I am asking you to understand what you are holding. The money in this box is every dollar I made and saved in 10 years of work. Every cash job. Every late night in this building. It was my penance and it was my preparation. It is yours. All of it. Also in this box you will find a second envelope. Inside is everything I was able to gather about Stoke and Crestline. Ledger copies. A statement from a man Stoke squeezed out of his own company. Names. Dates. Enough, I believe, to bring him down if it gets to the right hands. What you do with it is your choice, not mine, yours. You can take the money and go. Start somewhere new. Leave this building, leave this town, leave all of it behind. You would be taking nothing from me. You would have earned every dollar 10 times over just by surviving what I put you through. Or you can stay. You can pay the taxes. You can hold this ground. You can fight. It will be hard. Crestline will come for this land. They have been trying to take this whole valley for years, and they do not know who they are dealing with yet. But these walls are thick, Maya. I built them to last. And this land is the one thing Stoke never managed to touch. There is one more thing. The motorcycle in the center of the shop. I started building it for your 18th birthday. A foolish dream. That somehow someday we might ride somewhere together. That I might get to know you. That I might get to be your grandfather in some way that was real and present. I didn't get to finish it. Maybe you will. I have loved you every single day of your life. From a distance. In silence. In a way that probably looks from the outside like nothing at all. But it was never nothing. You were never abandoned, Maya. You were hidden. And I know that difference may feel very small right now. Maybe it will always feel small, but I need you to know it. Live well. Be happy. That is all I ever wanted for your mother. It is all I want for you, your grandfather. Edmund. The lighter burned out. The darkness came back. Maya sat down. Right there. On the cold concrete floor. The letter in her hands. The stacks of money on the table above her head. The skeleton of an unfinished motorcycle throwing long shadows she couldn't see anymore. She sat in the dark for a long time. She cried. Not loudly. Just the way crying happens when you have spent years training yourself not to do it in front of anyone. Quietly and completely, and all the way through, she cried for the 8-year-old who thought she was alone. Who was alone in every practical sense that mattered for 10 years. She cried for Eleanor, who was 18 when her whole life bent in a direction she never chose, and who spent the rest of it running, and who died at 28 in an apartment in the Bronx, leaving behind a child and a name she had borrowed from somewhere else. She cried for Edmund, who had made the brutal calculation that her safety was worth his silence, and who had been right and wrong at the same time in a way that was going to take her a very long time to untangle. And then she stopped, wiped her face with the back of her hand, sat in the silence. Outside, the woods were making small sounds, wind through pine needles, the creek in the distance, the kind of sounds that are not really silence, but that feel like it. She thought about the money. $95,000. She thought about the second envelope she hadn't opened yet. She thought about a company called Crestline, and a man named Raymond Stoke, and a building on Hollow Lane that someone had spent 10 years working in with careful, precise, deliberate hands. She thought about the motorcycle. He had started building it for her. She thought about the tools arranged in rows so precise they looked like someone meant to come back. She thought about 10 years of cash jobs in a building at the end of a dirt road, saving money he never spent writing letters he never sent. Letters. Were there letters? She would look in the morning. She would go through everything in the morning. For now she needed to sleep, and she needed to not fall apart any further. And she needed to be somewhere with walls around her, even if those walls smelled like 50-year-old motor oil. She found the blanket from the cot in the back room. Thin and scratchy and fine. She lay down on the floor of the workshop, her back against the leg of the steel work table. Above her, invisible in the dark, the skeleton of an unfinished motorcycle waited. She pulled the letter against her chest, closed her eyes. The darkness was different now. Not heavy, not pressing, just the ordinary absence of light. She could hear the creek. She let herself listen to it. And for the first time in 10 years, she was somewhere that was technically, legally against all odds hers. She slept. The morning came in gray and cold through the grimy workshop windows. Maya woke up on the concrete floor with a stiff neck and motor oil smell in her hair, and the letter from Edmund still pressed against her chest like she had been holding it all night, which she had. She lay there for a moment. Ceiling above her. Steel beams. Old fluorescent fixtures with dead bulbs. A cobweb in the corner that had been there long enough to collect dust on top of itself. She thought about everything. Then she stopped thinking about everything and sat up, because thinking about everything was a luxury. And she had work to do. The first order of business was light. Not the phone kind. Not the lighter kind. Real, actual, sustained light that didn't depend on a battery or a flame. She went through the cabinet again more carefully this time and found a heavy-duty flashlight on the bottom shelf behind two cans of turpentine. Clicked it on. Solid beam. Strong. The batteries were old, but they held. Good. Second order of business. The garage door. The padlock was frozen solid with rust. She stood in front of it for a moment, flashlight in hand, considering it the way Edmund probably would have. Methodically, without drama, she found the penetrating oil on the same shelf as the flashlight, sprayed it into the lock mechanism, waited, sprayed again, found a bolt cutter hanging on a hook near the workbench, heavy and red-handled, and braced herself. It took 40 minutes. Her shoulders screamed. Her hands went numb twice. But finally the chain gave with a crack like a small gunshot and fell away, and she put both hands on the bottom rail of the garage door and pushed up. It groaned, shuddered, rose. Light poured on. Real morning light. Cold and pale and completely honest about everything it touched. The workshop filled with it. The machines stopped being shadows and became themselves. Steel and iron and years of careful use. The workbenches with their precisely arranged tools. The motorcycle on the center table, its bare frame gleaming where the chrome hadn't oxidized. She stood in the open doorway and breathed in cold air. The dead tree was just a dead tree. Needed to come down for firewood. The overgrown driveway was just a driveway that needed clearing. The weeds around the foundation were just weeds. Problems, not omens. She could work with problems. She went back to the cash box. Counted again carefully in the morning light. $94,800. Plus the $230 she had left from her own money. She put the stacks back in order, replaced the box in the cabinet, locked it. Went to the small room and dug through the box of Edmund's clothes beneath the cot. Work shirts mostly. Flannel, cotton, heavy denim. Worn but clean. She found one that fit well enough and put it on over her own. It smelled like laundry detergent and metal filings. Not unpleasant. She made coffee on the camping stove using the supplies she found stacked neatly behind the cot. A canister of ground coffee, a small aluminum pot, some canned goods arranged with the quiet foresight of someone who knew someone was coming and wanted them to be okay when they got there. She drank the coffee standing in the open garage door, looking out at Hollow Lane and the tree line beyond it and the pale sky above everything. Edmund had looked at this same sky every morning. For years. She tried to understand what that felt like. Tried to find the shape of it. A man in his 50s living alone in a workshop at the end of a dirt road, saving money, gathering evidence, writing letters he never sent. Living like a monk or a prisoner, except voluntarily, except by choice. She tried to be angry about it. The anger kept sliding off into something more complicated. She finished the coffee, rinsed the cup, put it back on the crate exactly where it had been. Then she picked up the envelope with the cash, put on her jacket, and walked into Millhaven. The walk took 35 minutes on roads that were quiet enough she could hear her own footsteps the whole way. She passed a farm with a faded red barn and a hand-painted sign that said, AGS $2, no one visible, just chickens doing their thing in a wire pen. She passed a Methodist church with a sign out front that read, The light is always on, which she thought was either very comforting or mildly threatening, depending on your history with institutions. The town looked different in daylight. Still quiet. Still a little worn at the edges. But there was something in it that she hadn't seen the night before. Window boxes with late-season flowers. A hand-painted mural on the side of the hardware store, faded but careful, showing the valley in summer, all greens and blues. A cat sitting on a porch railing looking at her with complete authority. Real things. Lived-in things. She found the bank first. Small, local. One teller and one manager, a clock on the wall that was 4 minutes slow. The manager was a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and a no-nonsense manner that Maya immediately appreciated. Dorothea Webb. That was the name on the desk plaque. Maya sat down across from her and opened her backpack on the desk. Stacks of bills. Neatly counted. Rubber-banded in groups of 1,000. Dorothea Webb looked at the money, then at Maya, then back at the money. I need to make a deposit, Maya said. And then I need a certified check made out to the Millhaven County tax assessor. $9,100. Dorothea Webb looked at her for one more moment. Then she put her reading glasses on. "Let's get that sorted," she said. No questions, no suspicious looks. Just the calm efficiency of a woman who had seen a great many things in a great many years and had learned to let people have their business. Maya could have hugged her. She didn't, but she could have. An hour later, she walked out of the bank with a certified check and a deposit receipt and significantly less cash than she'd walked in with, and somehow felt richer than she'd ever had in her life. The county clerk's office was in the town hall, a squat brick building with an American flag out front that had seen better decades. The clerk inside was a man named, according to the sign on his desk, Harold Pruitt, and he looked like he had been sitting in that particular chair since approximately 1987, and had strong feelings about anyone who disturbed his system. She slid the certified check across his desk. He looked at it, stamped her paperwork with a sound that was deeply, viscerally satisfying. The sound of something official. Something done. "All squared up," he said, handing back her copy. "Property's yours, free and clear." Free and clear? 2 words. So much weight for so few syllables. She walked out of the town hall and stood on the steps in the September sun, and let herself feel it for exactly 10 seconds. Then she went to find somewhere to eat. The diner was the one she'd seen last night. Eat. The sign looked better in the daytime. The inside was what diners are supposed to be. Vinyl booths, a long counter, a coffee maker that had clearly been running since dawn. It smelled like bacon and syrup and that specific warmth that old diners trap and keep like sunlight in brick. She sat at the counter. The woman who appeared behind it was 50-something, solidly built with silver-streaked hair, pulled back, and an apron that had seen every possible breakfast. She looked at Maya the way people in small towns look at strangers. Not unfriendly, just thorough. "Coffee," she said. "Please." It appeared. Strong and hot and exactly what was needed. "You're new," the woman said. More a statement than a question. "I'm staying out on Hollow Lane," Maya said. "The old Harlow place." The woman went still. Just for a moment. Then she set the coffee pot down. "Edmund's workshop," she said. "I'm his granddaughter." A pause, long enough to mean something. "Winifred Galley," the woman said. "Fred. Everyone calls me Fred." She said it like she was deciding something, like the name was an offer being extended. "Maya Calloway." Fred nodded slowly. "Edmund was a quiet man, kept to himself. But when the pump on my coffee machine broke 3 winters ago, he came in on a Saturday and fixed it. Wouldn't take a dime for it. Just asked for a cup of coffee and sat at that stool for exactly 20 minutes. And then went home." She pointed at the stool Maya was sitting on. Maya looked down at it. Sat with that for a moment. "What do you know about Crestline Development?" she asked. Fred's expression did something careful. "I know they've been trying to buy up the valley for years. Made offers to half the people in this town. Some took them. Can't blame anyone who did. The money was real and the pressure was real." She paused. "Some didn't. And then things got complicated for them." "Complicated how?" "Permits getting denied. Building inspectors showing up. Tax reassessments." Fred poured more coffee without being asked. "The kind of complicated that doesn't have any one person's name on it." Maya nodded. "Did Edmund ever have trouble with them?" "Edmund's land has been in their sights for years. Something about the access road. His property is the last piece that blocks them from connecting 2 parcels they already own." Fred looked at her steadily. "They came around a few times when he was alive. He sent them away. And now they'll come around again." "I expect," Fred said, "that they already know you're here." She ordered breakfast. Eggs, toast, the works. Ate it slowly, watching the diner fill up with the morning crowd. Farmers and shopkeepers and a table of older men who appeared to meet there every day and argue about something comfortably familiar. Nobody stared at her. A few people nodded. One man in a flannel shirt said he'd known Edmund, that he'd been a fair man and a good welder. She walked back to Hollow Lane, feeling something she couldn't immediately name. like the ground under her feet was slightly more real than it had been that morning. She was 2 days into it when Prescott Lamb showed up. Day 3, technically. She was in the workshop with the garage door open, sorting Edmund's tools by type and laying them out on the workbenches when she heard tires on the gravel drive and looked up. Black car. Expensive. The kind with tinted windows that cost extra. The man who got out was polished in a way that didn't belong on Hollow Lane. Dark suit, silk tie shoes that had never touched gravel before and were not happy about it now. He was around 40, the sort of handsome that comes from money spent on maintenance rather than any particular genetic gift. He had a smile on when he walked toward her, and it hadn't reached his eyes yet. And Maya was fairly sure it wasn't going to bother trying. "Miss Calloway," he said, like he'd known exactly who she was before he got out of the car. She didn't answer, just waited. "Prescott Lamb." He extended a hand. "I represent Crestline Development." She looked at his hand, then at him. Then she crossed her arms. Prescott Lamb lowered his hand smoothly, like that had always been the plan. "I understand you've recently taken possession of this property," he said. His eyes moved across the open garage door, the tools, the workshop interior. Quick in cataloging, and not particularly impressed. "That's a significant undertaking for someone in your position." "My position," Maya said. "New to the area. Young. And the debt situation on this parcel is, of course, a complication." "The taxes are paid," she said. "As of this morning." Something flickered in his face, brief and controlled and gone. "Of course," he said. "Even so, the property itself has significant structural liabilities, and Crestline is prepared to make a very generous offer." He named a number. $20,000. "We absorb any remaining legal fees. You walk away free and clear with real capital to start your life." $20,000. For the land Edmund had spent years working on. For the workshop he had built to last. For the one thing Stoke had never managed to touch. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it wasn't. "No," she said. Lamb smiled. Like he'd expected this. Like it was step 2 of a protocol he'd run many times. "I don't think you fully understand the complications ahead," he said. His voice had gone softer. The kind of soft that is a disguise for something harder. "The property has a complex history. There are questions about the original deed, about the Edmund Harlow's financial history. These things have a way of creating obstacles for new owners, particularly owners who are, a small pause, perfectly calibrated, unfamiliar with local processes." "No," she said again, exactly the same way. The smile didn't change, but something behind it did. "You're making a mistake, Miss Calloway. You came to my property," she said, "without an invitation. You've made your offer. I've declined it. You can leave now." A beat. "Little girl," he said, very quietly, like he was sharing a confidence. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're right," she said, "and neither do you." He left. She stood in the open garage door and watched the black car move back down Hollow Lane, slow and deliberate, and disappear around the bend in the trees. Her heart was going considerably faster than she had let her face suggest. She turned back to the workshop, picked up the wrench she'd put down when she heard the car, got back to work, but her hands weren't quite steady, because Prescott Lamb would come back, or someone else would. That was how this worked. One polite offer, then less polite ones, then paperwork and inspectors and legal challenges, and the slow grinding machinery of people who had more resources than you, and no particular reason to stop. She needed to know more about what she was holding. She went to the second envelope that night, the one she hadn't opened yet. Edmund's weapon. She brought it to the small desk in the back room and sat down and opened it carefully under the beam of the flashlight. It was a lot, more than she expected. Edmund had been meticulous in a way that was almost overwhelming. Photocopied ledger pages, some of them clearly old edges brown. A handwritten statement dated 7 years ago from someone named Calvin Prentice. 3 pages describing in careful detail his experiences as a minority partner in one of Crestline's subsidiary companies before he was squeezed out. Names, account numbers, property transaction records from Millhaven County spanning 15 years with certain approvals highlighted in yellow marker. A name appearing repeatedly next to the approvals, Gerald Holt. She wrote it down separately. Looked at it. Gerald Holt. She didn't know the name. She would need to find out who he was and what position he held, and how he connected to everything else. But not tonight. Tonight she had done enough. She put the evidence back in order and returned it to the envelope. Hid it behind the panel in the back of the cabinet, the one she had discovered when she was reorganizing the shelves, and noticed it was slightly less deep than it should have been. Edmund's hiding place. She was using it now, which felt right somehow. Like a conversation they were having across whatever distance separated them. She woke up on day 15 with a plan. Not a grand one. Not the kind with arrows and flowcharts and a whiteboard covered in colored markers. Just a sequence. Just the next thing and the thing after that. Which was all she had ever needed to function. Which was all she had ever trusted. First, talk to Walter Briggs. Really talk to him. Second, find Owen. Third, figure out what Gerald Holt's name in Edmund's files was actually worth. Fourth, stop waking up at 3 in the morning running worst-case scenarios until her brain felt like an engine left running in a closed garage. That last one was aspirational. She made coffee, stood in the open garage door in Edmund's flannel shirt, and watched the morning come in over the tree line. The light was different now than it had been 2 weeks ago. Sharper. The trees had started turning. Orange at the edges first. Then red. Then the particular gold that means October is settling in for real and is not going to apologize for what comes after. She drank her coffee. She thought about her grandfather standing in this same doorway. Same mug probably. Same coffee probably. Same cold air coming off the ridge. Looking at the same trees. Did he talk to them? Did he have a radio? Did he fill the silence with anything, or did he just live in it? She didn't know. She would never know. Which was the specific grief of inheriting a person's life after they were already gone. You got the objects, the tools, the spaces, but not the interior, not the running commentary, not the small daily texture of what it had actually been like to be Edmund Harlow at 7 in the morning with a cup of coffee and 30 years of choices behind him. She set the mug down. Enough. Next thing, Walter Briggs lived a mile up the road in a farmhouse that looked like it had been standing since before anyone thought to name the county. White-clappered green shutters, a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. A barn behind it read functional. Fields beyond that harvested and turned under for winter. She knocked. He opened the door and looked at her and did not look surprised. "I thought you'd come eventually," he said. "Can I come in?" A pause, long enough to be deliberate. Then he stepped back. The kitchen was warm. A wood stove in the corner, same as hers. A table that had fed decades of meals, scarred and solid. He poured coffee without asking which she appreciated. Set it in front of her. Sat down across the table with his own. She wrapped her hands around the mug. And she told him. All of it. Not because she had calculated that telling him was strategically optimal, but because she was tired of carrying the weight of Edmund's story alone. Because it was Walter who had planted the wildflowers. Because it was Walter who had known Edmund for 10 years in the quiet neighborly way of 2 people who don't talk much but understand each other's presence. Because he deserved to know what he'd been living next to. She told him about the letter, about Eleanor, about Raymond Stoke and the confession and the prison and the years of deliberate invisibility. She told him about the evidence package, about Crestline and Gerald Holt, about Prescott Lamb and his $20,000 offer, and the building inspector with his clipboard of manufactured concerns. Walter sat across from her and did not interrupt once. His face did things. Quiet things. The kind of emotional movement that happens on faces that are not accustomed to expressing what they're feeling and are doing their best anyway. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. The stove ticked. A crow called outside. The kitchen clock moved through 40 seconds of silence. He never said a word. Walter said finally, "Not once. 10 years. He was just the man at the end of the lane." He couldn't. "I know." He looked at his hands. "I know that. But..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. She nodded. "Owen," she said carefully. Walter looked up. "I'm not asking you to do anything," she said. "I need you to know that. I'm not here with a plan that requires something from you. I just..." She paused. "I want to understand what we're dealing with. What Stokes Reach actually looks like from inside it." Walter looked at his coffee mug for a long time. Then he said, "Owen took the job because they asked him to, and saying no didn't feel like a real option. They'd made that clear." His jaw was tight. Not with anger exactly. With the specific tension of a man who has been unable to protect his child and has had to live with that. He drives, runs things between sites, attends meetings and writes things down and sends reports. He doesn't know everything, but he knows more than they probably think he does. "Has he talked to you about it?" "Some. Enough for me to lose sleep." He looked at her. "He's not their man, Miss Calloway. He's their leverage." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm here talking to you instead of being angry about what you told me to do." Something shifted in Walter's face. Not a smile. Something quieter than that. Something that looked like the moment a door that has been stuck for a long time finally moves. "What do you need?" he said. She thought about that. "Not yet," she said. "I need to talk to Owen first. If he's willing. And I need to know that whatever happens next, you're not going to be in the middle of it alone." Walter was quiet. "Edmund," he said. "The wildflowers." "Yes." "I asked him once why he wanted them there. He said..." He stopped, cleared his throat. "He said he wanted someone to see them when they came down the lane. That he was keeping them for someone." She felt it in the center of her chest. That particular ache. The kind that is not unpleasant. The kind that means something mattered. "He was keeping them for me," she said. Quietly. Not a question. Walter nodded. She walked back to the workshop and stood in the garage door for a while, and didn't think about anything in particular, and let the October air do its work. Owen came to her. She hadn't gone looking. She had told herself she would give it a few days. Let Walter have time to process, let things move at the speed they needed to move. She was reorganizing the flat file drawers where Edmund's plans were stored, making an inventory, when she heard footsteps on the gravel and looked up. He was younger than she expected, though she didn't know why. 28, she knew that. But he looked younger than 28. Or maybe not younger exactly. More like someone who had been carrying something heavy enough to press a kind of age into him that wasn't quite right for his face yet. He stopped at the garage door, looked around the workshop, looked at her. "Owen Briggs," he said. "Maya Calloway." "I know." He put his hands in his jacket pockets. "My dad told me you came by." She waited. "I've been thinking about coming here for a week," he said. "I kept not doing it. What made today different?" He was quiet for a moment. "There's a meeting next Thursday," he said. "Internal Crestline, about this property." He looked at the floor of the workshop, at the motorcycle frame on the center table. Back at her. "I'm supposed to be there because I drive the regional manager, but I'll hear things. I always hear things." She looked at him steadily. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I know why my dad signed what he signed," he said. And his voice had a quality she recognized. The quality of someone who has been ashamed of something for long enough that saying it out loud is its own kind of relief. "And I know it wasn't because he wanted to. And I've been the reason for that for a year now, and I'm..." He stopped. Started again. "I'm done being that." The workshop was quiet. She thought about Edmund, who had made a choice a long time ago to protect someone he loved, and how that choice had rippled forward through decades and turned into her standing here in a building she hadn't known existed 3 weeks ago. She thought about the cost of that kind of protection. Who paid it? How long it lasted? Okay, she said. Just that. No complicated conditions. No list of requirements. He looked slightly surprised, like he had prepared himself for something harder. Okay, she said again. Tell me what you know. Tell me when you know more. And be careful. I mean it. Don't take risks you don't have to take. You're not worried I'll change my mind, he said. I'm worried you'll get hurt, she said. That's different. Owen came back 4 days after that first conversation. He knocked this time, which felt like a small thing, which was not a small thing at all. Maya was under the motorcycle frame with a wrench, and Edmund's handwritten plan spread on the floor beside her when she heard it. She slid out, wiped her hands on a rag. He was standing in the doorway with his jacket collar up against the November cold, and an expression that told her Thursday's meeting had happened. And he had things to say. She poured coffee, set it in front of him on the workbench, sat across from him. He talked. The meeting had been 11 people in a conference room in a building 2 towns over. Prescott Lamb had run it. Regional manager on one side. 2 men Owen didn't recognize on the other. And the discussion had been about Hollow Lane, about the Harlow property, about how long they were prepared to wait and what tools were still available to them. They mentioned a code enforcement escalation, Owen said. Something about the roof. And they mentioned the bar complaint against Arthur Finch, specifically as a way to cut off her legal support. He paused. Her being you. Maya nodded. They talked about timelines, he said. 90 days from the tax payoff, which means they think the money situation was a one-time fix and they just need to outlast you financially. They don't think you have resources for a sustained fight. They're wrong about that. I know. He looked at his coffee. And one more thing. Gerald Holt was on the call. Not in the room. On the phone. He said the planning board has a meeting in 6 weeks, that there are applications coming through that will create legally complicated adjacencies to your property line. He looked up. I don't fully understand what that means. It means they're trying to box the property in with approved developments on all sides, so the land becomes functionally unusable without selling, Maya said. It's a pressure tactic. Owen was quiet for a moment. How do you know that? Edmund's notes. She tapped the file on the workbench. He documented every tactic they used on other properties in the valley. He was thorough. Owen looked at the file, then at the workshop around him, at the tools and the machines and the motorcycle frame. He really did all this, he said. Not a question. More like something settling into place. All of this, she said. For 10 years. Owen was quiet for a moment. My dad, he said. He's known what Edmund was for a long time, hasn't he? Not the details, just the quality of him. I think so. That's why he planted the flowers. She didn't say anything. Because sometimes the right response to something true is just to let it be true. She called Nora that night. Nora answered on the second ring, which Maya had noticed was consistent. Nora Finch answered the phone quickly and spoke precisely and never said more than she needed to. These were qualities Maya appreciated more the longer she knew her. She told Nora what Owen had reported, about the code enforcement escalation, about Holt and the planning board meeting, about the timeline they were working from inside Crestline. Nora listened without interrupting. Then she said, The planning board meeting is public record. The applications Holt intends to advance should be filed within the next 2 weeks. I want to see them the moment they're available. I can get them. I know you can. A pause. Maya, the bar complaint against my father. I've drafted a formal response. I want you to read it before I file it. Why? Because your name is in it. Another pause. Significantly. Nora, The response argues that my father's conduct was not only ethical, but that the complaint itself constitutes an attempt to interfere with legitimate legal counsel in a matter involving what appears to be a pattern of coordinated misconduct by Crestline Development and certain county officials. She paused. It is a document that will be read by people with the authority to ask questions. Serious questions about things beyond the bar complaint. Maya understood. You're using the complaint to open a door, she said. They handed us the door, Nora said. I'm just walking through it. There was a quality in Nora Finch that Maya had been trying to identify since the first night she came to the workshop. Something that sat underneath the precision and the careful professional manner. It wasn't until now, listening to her on the phone in the cold of the workshop with the stove going and Edmund's plans on the table, that she recognized it. It was the same quality she had seen in Arthur. Just younger, less worn, more ready to move. They were the same, father and daughter, carrying the same specific drive to correct a thing that had been wrong for a long time. File it, Maya said. The weeks that followed had a different quality than the first three. The first 3 weeks of Hollow Lane had been about establishing, securing ground, learning the shape of the place and the people and the problem. These weeks were about moving. She met with Fred Galley 3 times at the diner after closing hours. Fred put coffee on, and they sat in the empty restaurant with the chairs up on the tables around them. And Fred talked about Millhaven, the real version, the one that didn't make it into the county's promotional materials. She talked about the McIntosh family, who had owned the orchard on Route 9 for 4 generations, until a series of tax reassessments made it impossible to hold. She talked about the Hendersons, who had tried to fight a development application on the land behind their farmhouse and found that every permit they needed for their own property suddenly required additional review. She talked about the ways a small town can be quietly strangled by something that never shows its full face, something that works through paperwork and process, and the slow grinding weight of institutional friction. 8 families, over 15 years. Parcels assembled piece by piece. And Gerald Holt's signature on every approval that mattered. Maya wrote everything down. Dates, names, parcel numbers. She cross-referenced what Fred knew with Edmund's documentation. They matched. More than matched. They built a picture that was coherent and consistent and deeply carefully damning. She put the compiled file in the flat file drawer, with Edmund's plans. Then she went back to the motorcycle, because the motorcycle was the other thing. The thing that ran parallel to everything else. The thing she went back to every evening after the day's work was done. The thing that was not strategic or tactical or useful in any immediate sense. The thing that was just hers. Edmund's plans were detailed enough to follow if you were patient. And Maya had discovered over the course of these weeks that she was patient in a way she hadn't known before Hollow Lane. The system had made her fast, made her reactive, made her good at reading rooms and people and threat levels and escape routes. But this place had given her something different. The patience of someone who has enough ground under their feet to stand still for a while. She worked on the motorcycle in the evenings. Piece by piece, frame engine electrical fuel system. She made mistakes, went back, corrected, made different mistakes, corrected those too. Edmund had left detailed notes on every component, not just technical specifications, observations, things he had noticed while working, why he had chosen certain parts over others, what felt right and what felt wrong, and how you knew the difference after enough time. She read his notes like letters, because they were in their way. She was learning his handwriting, the way he wrote the letter E, the way he'd pressed hard on certain words like he was underlining them from underneath. It was not the same as knowing him. She understood that. But it was something. It was not nothing. The county planning applications went up on the public records portal on a Wednesday. Nora had set an alert. She called Maya at 7 in the morning. "They're filed," she said. 3 applications, 2 to the north, 1 to the east. The adjacency argument is exactly what you described. How long do we have to object? 30 days from filing. The planning board meeting is in 22. Can we challenge Holt's involvement given the conflict of interest? We can. And it will be on record regardless of whether they remove him. A pause. Maya, I've also spoken to someone. A federal contact. Someone I've worked with before on cases involving land fraud and municipal corruption. Maya went still. I sent her a summary, Nora said. Not the full evidence package, just enough to establish the pattern. She called me back in 6 hours. Another pause. That's not nothing. No, Maya said. That's not nothing. She wants the full package, everything Edmund compiled, everything you've added. She wants it in her hands within a week. Maya looked at the flat file drawer. 10 years of Edmund's work. Carefully documented. Meticulously organized. Ready. She'll have it, Maya said. The night Nora and Arthur arrived together was the night everything shifted. Maya knew Arthur was bringing someone, but she didn't know who until headlights appeared at the end of Hollow Lane around 8 in the evening, and 2 figures came through the workshop door. Arthur first moving slower than he had in the city, favoring his left side in a way he probably thought wasn't noticeable. And behind him a woman, 40 maybe, dark hair, practical cut, a coat that had survived real winters, the look of someone who had learned to calibrate their expressions the way you calibrate a tool. Precisely. On purpose. This is my daughter, Arthur said. Nora Finch looked around the workshop with quick assessing eyes. The machines, the motorcycle frame that was now cleaned and partially disassembled, the stove in the corner with the coffee pot on it. Then she looked at Maya. He talks about you, she said. Meeting Arthur. Good things, Maya said. Complicated things. Not unkind, just honest. Which is how I know they're true. They sat around the workbench. Maya had found 3 mismatched stools and set them up around the steel work table. Coffee. Edmund's old mugs. There was something almost funny about it. Almost. Arthur explained the complaint. Carefully and completely. Nora had seen the filings. She disagreed with her father's decision to remain involved. She said so directly. The complaint has no merit, Nora said, but it's designed to drain time and energy and create the impression of impropriety, and he is 68 years old with a heart that is performing at approximately 70% capacity, and his doctor has told him twice. Nora, Arthur said, twice she continued, that sustained stress is a documented risk factor for his specific, Nora. She stopped. Set her mug down. Looked at the table. Maya watched them. The compressed practice dynamic of a father and daughter, who had been having versions of this argument for years and loved each other completely, and were both in their different ways completely right. Mr. Finch, Maya said carefully, I need you to be honest with me. If this is costing you more than you should be paying, you have to tell me. Arthur looked at her. I spent 30 years telling myself there was nothing I could have done for Edmund, he said. I have had 30 years to examine that claim, and I can tell you with confidence that it was not entirely true. He folded his hands on the table. I'm not going anywhere. The room was quiet. Nora looked at him for a long moment. Something in her face that was complicated and private and not entirely resolved. Then she picked up her coffee mug and turned to Maya. The complaint filing came with a document package, she said. Her voice had changed, shifted into something more businesslike, but with a different quality now, less resistant. Standard procedure. They included their own documentation of Edmund Harlow's history to establish the narrative that his estate was troubled, and the transfer of property to you was irregular. She reached into her bag and put a folder on the table. I've been through it. Maya looked at the folder. Most of it is exactly what you'd expect, Nora said. Criminal record, civil debt history, real estate transactions. She paused, but there's something in the filing they probably didn't realize they'd included. She opened the folder to a tabbed page. In their attempt to document every legal proceeding connected to Edmund Harlow, she said, they included the county planning records connected to the original purchase of his Hollow Lane property, And in those records attached as a supporting document is a routine planning approval signed by a Gerald Holt. She looked up, with a notation in the margin, handwritten, referencing a specific transaction number that cross-references to a Crestline development account. Silence. He signed the approval, Maya said slowly, and noted the transaction number, connecting the approval to payment. In his own handwriting, Nora said. In a document they submitted. The three of them sat with that for a moment. Maya thought about Edmund, about meticulous evidence packages and copying everything and playing a long game across years, about the patience it took to gather the right things and wait. And then she thought about Crestline's lawyers, so certain of their institutional weight, submitting documents in bulk without reading every page carefully enough. She looked at Nora. They made a mistake, she said. Nora Finch almost smiled. They made a mistake. Arthur reached for his coffee mug. His hand was steady. Then we have work to do, he said. She didn't sleep much that night. She lay on the cot in the small room with the stove ticking as it cooled, and the sound of the wind in the trees outside, and she went over everything in her head. The money. Paid. The property. Secured. The evidence. In Arthur's hands. The name Gerald Holt. Now confirmed by Crestline's own documentation. Owen Briggs inside Crestline. Walter Briggs on his farm making his quiet calculations. Fred Galley at the diner watching and saying exactly enough, and Raymond Stokes somewhere she couldn't see him. The man who had made her mother run and her grandfather go to prison, and her own childhood happen the way it happened. She thought about the motorcycle. She'd been working on it in the evenings after the film practical work was done. Slowly, methodically, reading Edmund's plans, which she had found in a flat file drawer she hadn't opened until her 5th day there. They were detailed and clear, and done in a handwriting she was starting to recognize, now starting to feel almost familiar. She didn't know how to build a motorcycle. She hadn't known how to do most of the things she'd done in the past 2 weeks, but she had learned every time that the gap between not knowing and knowing was just work. Just time. Just the willingness to be bad at something long enough to get less bad. She closed her eyes. She thought about a man who planted wildflowers along a fence line because he wanted the place to look like someone lived there who cared about it. She pulled the blanket tighter and slept. The day Maya walked into the federal field office building in the city, she wore Edmund's flannel shirt under her jacket. She didn't think about why until she was already on the train, and then she decided it didn't matter why. It was what she wanted to wear. And wanting things she was learning was a muscle that needed regular use. Agent Harriet Solano was nothing like what Maya had expected, which was foolish because Maya had not known what she expected. Solano was around 50 with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the kind of stillness that comes from years of listening to people carefully. She shook Maya's hand, looked at the envelope Maya set on the desk. Nora Finch speaks well of you, Solano said. She speaks carefully about everything, Maya said. Solano almost smiled. Sit down. Maya sat. Walk me through it, Solano said. Your version, not the documentation, the story. So Maya told it. She started with the garbage bag and the $10 deed and the workshop in the dark. She told it the way she had learned to tell things in these past weeks. Not performing, not managing her listener's reaction, just moving through it in order with the facts in the right places and the emotion where it actually lived instead of where it was expected to go. Solano listened, did not interrupt, did not write anything down, just listened with her full attention in a way that was uncommon and slightly unnerving. And also Maya realized what it felt like to be taken seriously by someone with the power to do something about it. When Maya finished, Solano was quiet for a moment. The Harlow evidence, she said. The ledgers, the Prentice statement. It's all in the package. And the county records, the Holt annotations, including the document Crestline submitted themselves. Solano looked at her. They submitted that, she said, in their bar complaint filing against Arthur Finch. Nora found it. A pause. How old are you? Solano said. 18. Solano looked at her for a moment longer. Then she picked up the envelope. "Give me 2 weeks," she said. Maya went home on the train, hollow lane in the dark. Stove, coffee, the motorcycle in the center of the workshop. She stood looking at it. It was almost done. She needed one more part. A specific carburetor component she'd been searching for. Edmund's note said he had ordered it. But she hadn't found the delivery. 3 days ago she'd gone through every cabinet in the workshop a second time and found it in the last place she looked, which was always the way. Tucked in a paper bag on the bottom shelf of the storage cabinet labeled in Edmund's handwriting. For the bike. Do not use for anything else. She had laughed out loud when she found it. Alone in the workshop in the middle of the afternoon. Just laughed. Because of course he had ordered it. Of course it was there waiting. Because he had been building this thing with her in mind. And he had thought of everything right down to the last specific part. She installed it that night. Took 2 hours. Made one mistake, caught it, corrected it. Then she sat back on the floor and looked at the motorcycle. It was finished, chrome and black. The frame that had been bare and skeletal the night she arrived now fully clothed. The engine solid in its housing. The seat she had found rolled in a canvas bag in the corner of the back room, apparently original, apparently preserved, apparently waiting for exactly this. It looked like something. It looked like exactly what Edmund had planned. She would try to start it tomorrow. Not tonight. Tonight she just wanted to look at it. She sat on the floor with her back against the workbench, and her coffee going cold beside her, and the stove ticking, and looked at the motorcycle that her grandfather had started building for her birthday, in a workshop she hadn't known existed. "I never got to finish it," he had written. "Maybe you will." She had. 2 weeks later, Harriet Solano called. Maya was in the workshop. Of course she was in the workshop. She was always in the workshop now. It was where she thought, where she moved through problems, where she was most like herself, which was a sentence that would have made no sense to her 6 weeks ago and made complete sense now. "The evidence package is solid," Solano said. "Harlow's documentation is exceptional. The Holt annotations are significant. And the pattern we're seeing across the county records over 15 years is consistent and documentable." Maya's heart was going hard. "What does that mean?" she said. "It means we're opening a formal investigation." A pause. "Into Crestline Development, into Raymond Stoke, into Gerald Holt and his conduct as a planning board member." Another pause. "This will take time. These things always take time. But the wheels are moving. Will they come after the property before the investigation concludes? They may try, which is why I want you to know that the evidence you've provided is now part of a federal record. Any action against you or your properties will be visible in a way it wasn't before." A pause. "I'm not promising you safety. I'm telling you the ground has shifted. The ground has shifted." Maya stood in the center of the workshop and felt the concrete floor under her feet. "Thank you," she said. "Thank Nora Finch," Solano said. "And thank your grandfather." She called Arthur first. Then Nora. Then she walked up the lane to Fred's diner because she needed to tell someone in person, and Fred was the person she wanted to tell. Fred was wiping down the counter when Maya came in. The lunch crowd was gone. The afternoon light was coming through the windows at a low angle, the November light that is more gold than anything else, the light that makes everything look like a memory of itself. Fred looked at her face and put the cloth down. "Tell me," she said. Maya told her. Fred listened. Her expression moved through several things. Relief primarily. The specific relief of someone who has been waiting for something to change for a very long time and has almost stopped believing it would. She sat down on the stool across the counter from Maya. Just sat down, which Fred never did during working hours. 15 years, Fred said. "At least." "My cousin's family thought," Fred said. "The Macintosh Orchard. They sold in 2015. They didn't want to. But there were tax reassessments 3 years in a row and permits held up, and they were. She stopped. They left the valley, moved to Florida. Hated it. She looked at the counter. If this holds, if they actually go after Holt. Nora is already filing the planning board objection, Maya said, on the record, with the conflict of interest formally documented. Fred was quiet. Then she stood up, went behind the counter, came back with 2 mugs of coffee and a piece of pie she cut from a whole one under a glass dome on the counter. Edmund's favorite, she said, setting it in front of Maya. Apple. He came in every Friday. Maya looked at the pie. Every Friday, she said, without fail. Sat right where you're sitting, had his coffee and his pie and read whatever he was reading and left exactly 20 minutes later. She pointed at the stool Maya was sitting on. Maya looked down at it, then back at Fred. What was he reading, she said. Do you remember? Fred thought about it. History books mostly, old ones, and sometimes, she paused, almost smiled. Sometimes he had these folded pieces of paper he'd write on, while he ate. I never asked what they were. Maya put the fork down. Letters, she said, quietly. He was writing letters. Fred looked at her. He was a man, she said finally, who had a great deal to say and no one he was allowed to say it to. The investigation moved the way Solano had said it would. Slowly, and then all at once. For the first 3 weeks after Solano's call, not much visible happened. Crestline filed the expected objections to Nora's planning board challenge. Gerald Holt recused himself from the 3 pending applications, which was not an admission of anything but was also not nothing. Prescott Lamb did not come back to Hollow Lane. The building inspector did not return. The silence had a different quality than before. Not the silence of nothing happening. The silence of something happening out of sight. Maya worked on the workshop, fixed the legitimate electrical issues, patched the roof with the help of a contractor Arthur recommended, addressed the drainage problem with the help of Walter, who showed up one morning with a trenching tool and his son, and 3 hours of competent wordless labor. Owen had said almost nothing to her since the information exchange, which she understood. He was still inside Crestline, still driving, still careful. She did not push. She trusted the timeline. She was learning to trust timelines. The meeting at the county hall happened on a Thursday in late November. Not a formal hearing, a public session on the planning applications. Crestline's lawyer was there. Nora was there. Arthur was there, looking tired but solid. Maya sat in the front row of the public gallery in her good jeans and Edmund's flannel shirt, which she had washed and pressed for the occasion. She was not presenting. Nora was presenting. Maya was there because it was her property and her grandfather's work, and she was going to look at it. The session went through its procedural stages. Documents introduced. Arguments made. Nora was precise and thorough and referenced the conflict of interest documentation with the specific contained energy of someone who knows exactly what they are doing and does not need to perform it. Crestline's lawyer was good. Maya could see that. He was experienced and prepared, and he was doing exactly what he was paid to do, but he was working with a structure that had a crack in it now. And the crack was Gerald Holt's own handwriting in his own submitted document. And the crack was 15 years of records that Solano's office now had access to. And the crack was the fact that none of this was invisible anymore. The session chair called for public comment. Fred stood up. She was not a dramatic person. She did not raise her voice. She stood at the public comment microphone in her good coat with her reading glasses on and spoke for exactly 4 minutes about what she had watched happen to businesses and families in Millhaven over 15 years. She named dates. She named parcels. She named people. She sat down. A man Maya didn't know stood up. 3rd row. Gray hair, work coat. He introduced himself as the son of a man who had owned land on the Eastern Ridge sold under pressure 7 years ago. He had 3 minutes, and he used them. Then a woman. Then another. 6 people in total. Not a flood. Not a movement. Just 6 people standing up in a county hall on a Thursday in November and saying what they knew in plain language on the public record. One after another. Maya sat in the front row and watched them. She had not organized this. She had not asked anyone to come. She had told the truth to the people closest to her, and they had told it to others. And this was what had happened. Not a wave, a chain, person to person, the oldest kind of movement there is. At the end of the session, Nora submitted the formal objection documentation and requested that all 3 planning applications be tabled, pending review of the conflict of interest findings. The session chair said he would take it under advisement, which meant nothing definitive, which meant the work continued, which was fine. Maya had learned something about work in the last 2 months, about what it actually meant to build something, that it was not one decisive blow. It was every morning, every next thing, every cup of coffee in the cold air, and every small movement forward that felt inadequate in isolation and accumulated into something real. Outside the county hall in the parking lot, Arthur found her. He looked better than he had a month ago, some color in his face. His eyes behind those thick glasses doing that thing they did when something was occurring to him. 6 people, he said. 6 people, she agreed. Edmund would have... He started, stopped. What? He thought about it. He would have been surprised, Arthur said. He always thought people wouldn't come forward, that they'd be too afraid, too tired. He looked at the parking lot, at Fred talking to the woman who had been the last to speak, at Walter Briggs standing by his truck with his hands in his pockets. He spent 10 years trying to gather enough evidence to do this without needing anyone else. Maya looked at Arthur. He didn't know he could ask, she said. Arthur was quiet. No, he said. He didn't. She thought about that on the drive back, about how much damage the inability to ask for help does. How many years it adds to a fight that didn't need to take that long. Edmund had gathered his evidence alone in a building at the end of a dirt road because he believed that alone was the only way. That connection was liability. That love was exposure. He had protected her with that belief, and he had also paid for it. In years. In solitude. In 30 years of Fridays at a diner counter writing letters he put in a drawer and never sent. She was not going to make that mistake. Harriet Solano called on a Tuesday in December. 6 weeks after their meeting. 2 weeks after the county hall session. Crestline's accounts have been frozen, she said. Pending investigation. Raymond Stoke has been served. A pause. Gerald Holt resigned from the planning board this morning. Maya was standing in the middle of the workshop. She sat down on the floor. Just sat down. The 3 planning applications are automatically voided, Solano continued. The tabling request is moot, and the bar complaint against Arthur Finch has been withdrawn. Withdrawn. Is it over? Maya said. And she knew it wasn't. Not legally. Not entirely. But she needed to hear what Solano would say. This part of it, Solano said. The investigation will continue. There will be legal proceedings. It will be a long road, but the immediate pressure on your property is done. A pause. They know they're exposed. They're not coming after a piece of land right now. They have much larger problems. Maya sat on the floor of the workshop. Around her, Edmund's tools on his workbenches, Edmund's machines cleaned and organized ready for use. The motorcycle on the center table. Finished. Just sitting there. Waiting. Thank you, she said. Thank the paperwork, Solano said. That's what did it. 30 years of careful documentation, not the dramatic stuff, the paperwork. She called everyone. Nora first, who said good and made a note about pending civil remedies, and then said something that sounded very much like she was glad just underneath the precision. Arthur, who was quiet for a long time and then said he would have been relieved. Just that. He would have been relieved. Fred, who said she was making apple pie. Walter, who said nothing for a moment and then said thank you and hung up quickly, and she was fairly sure she knew why. Owen, who said I knew it. like it was a thing he had been holding for a long time that he could finally put down. She didn't call anyone else. She didn't need to. She sat in the workshop for a while. Stove going. Cold pressing at the open garage door. The particular dark of a December evening settling in over the tree line. Then she went to the cabinet, the flat file drawer. Not the one with Edmund's plans. The other one. The one she had found 3 weeks ago behind the panel in the back of the cabinet. The one that didn't line up quite right until you pressed it at the corner. Solano had mentioned it during their second call. Personal effects not relevant to the investigation. Transferred to Maya by registered mail. A small box. Inside the box 10 envelopes, each one sealed, each one dated, each one addressed to Maya Calloway in Edmund's handwriting. Strong and slightly slanted. Pressed hard into the paper. Her name on every one. She had not been ready to open them. Not until now. She brought them to the workbench. Set them out in order by date. Sat on the stool. Outside the wind was moving through the pines. That low, constant sound that she had gotten used to over these 2 months had come to find steadying, had started to think of as belonging to her in the specific way that the sounds of home belong to a person. She picked up the first envelope. Dated the year she turned 8. Her mother had been gone for weeks. Maya had been in the system for weeks. And Edmund had been here. In this building, at this desk. Writing. She broke the seal. The handwriting was the same. A little younger looking somehow. More tightly wound. My dearest Maya, she breathed. Today you are 8 years old, and I am sitting in a workshop I just bought in a town I barely know, and I am wondering what you look like. Arthur says you have your mother's eyes. I am choosing to believe that because Eleanor's eyes were remarkable. Because I need something to picture. I don't know where you are exactly. I know the state has you. I know you're safe in the way that means alive and housed. I know that is not the same as truly safe, and I am not going to pretend otherwise, even in a letter you will never read. What I want for you today is someone who makes you laugh. Just that. One person. Who knows how to make you laugh? She put the letter down for a moment, picked it up again. She read all 10. It took a long time. Not because they were long. Because they weren't. Each one was short. A page, maybe 2. The kind of writing that happens when you have a great deal to say and have learned to be disciplined with it. The kind that chooses carefully. What he wanted for her at 9, at 10, at 12, at 14, at 16. Not grand things. Not the things people say in speeches. Just the ordinary, extraordinary things. Someone to trust. A book that changed the way she saw something. One morning she woke up not dreading the day. The knowledge that she was good at something, whatever something it turned out to be. At 15 he had written, I hope by now you know that surviving something does not define you. That what you do after is more yours than what you endured. At 17 I hope you have learned to be unreasonably patient with yourself. I was never able to do that. I think it would have helped. And the last one. Her 18th birthday. Written in the months before he died. My dearest Maya, if I am alive when you read this, I have failed at everything I planned. And I owe you the longest conversation of my life. If I am gone, then Arthur did as I asked. And you found the door and you walked through it. Which means you were always going to be all right. Which means the thing I was most afraid of was the thing I should have spent less time being afraid of. I built you a motorcycle. I don't know if you ride. I don't know if you want to. But I built it because I wanted to make you something with my hands. I have never been good at words except in letters I don't send, but I am good with my hands. And it was the one gift I knew how to give you. The workshop is solid. I built it to last. And the valley is beautiful in a way that takes a while to see, but once you see it, you will not unsee it. I hope you stay. I hope if you don't, that you find your way back. I hope you understand even a little that everything I did that looked like absence was the wrong shape for what it actually was. I have loved you every single day. Your grandfather. Edmund. She folded the letter, set it down on the workbench, sat for a long time in the workshop that he had built to last, with the stove that he had stocked with wood and the tools that he had arranged with the precision of someone who expected them to be used again. She was not going to be dramatic about this. She was not going to pretend that 10 letters fixed the 10 years. They didn't. They couldn't. The 10 years were the 10 years. They had happened, and they had shaped her, and some of what they had made her was hard, and some of what they had made her was, she was beginning to understand, actually quite useful. But the letters were real, and they had been here, waiting, and that was something. That was not nothing. She got up. She went to the motorcycle. She had already checked it twice, 3 times actually, because she was not the kind of person who assumed things worked without verifying. She checked the fuel, the electrical connection, the throttle, the brake. She had watched enough tutorial videos on her phone over the past month to have opinions about carburetor tuning. Edmund would have found that funny, she thought. She let herself have that. She sat on the seat for the first time. It fit. Of course it fit. Because he had built it for her, which meant he had thought about her size, her height, the length of her reach, which meant he had held those details about her in his head while he built it, which meant she had been present in this workshop in some form for years. She pressed the starter. The engine turned over, caught, roared, a sound like something waking up after a very long time, like something that had been waiting, holding its breath, patient in the specific way that made things wait longer than you'd think. The workshop filled with the sound of it. She sat on the motorcycle with the engine running and the stove going in the corner, and Edmund's tools on the workbenches, and the plans in the flat file drawer, and the 10 letters folded on the table. And she let the sound of the engine fill the whole space. Then she walked the motorcycle to the open garage door, rolled it out onto the gravel. The December air hit her face, cold, clean, smelling of pine and the particular mineral sharpness of winter coming in off the ridge. She put on the helmet, Edmund's, found in a cabinet on her second week, hanging on a hook like it had been placed there specifically, which it had. She sat on the seat again, let the engine warm, watched the tree line. Up the road she could see the light in Walter's farmhouse, yellow and steady in the early dark. Fred's diner would be closed by now, but there would be a light on in the back. Arthur would be in his office in the city, probably with his shoes off reading. Nora would be at her desk working, because Nora Finch was always at her desk working, and it was a quality Maya had come to find oddly comforting. And somewhere in the federal system, in a file that had her name and Edmund's name, and Raymond Stokes' name and Gerald Holt's name, the paperwork was doing its slow, necessary, unglamorous work. She put the bike in gear. She didn't know where she was going. Down Hollow Lane first, then Mill Road, then wherever the road went from there. She was not leaving Millhaven. She wanted to be clear about that, even just to herself. She was not running. She had the deed in the flat file drawer, and Edmund's tools on the workbenches, and 10 letters on the table, and a workshop that he had built to last. And she intended to last right along with it. But she had been inside these walls for 2 months, and the engine was running. And the road was there. And for the first time in her life, the road was something she was choosing, instead of something she was being pushed onto. She let the clutch out. The motorcycle moved forward, gravel under the tires. Then the packed dirt of Hollow Lane. Then the road opening up ahead of her, the headlight cutting into the dark, the engine steady and warm and exactly as loud as it needed to be. The cold rushed at her face, real and immediate. The pines on either side moved in the wind. She thought about Edmund, not with grief, not with anger, with something that did not have a clean name yet, but that she expected would become familiar over time. The thing that happens when you understand someone fully enough to stop needing them to have been different. She rode past Walter's farmhouse. He was there on the porch, which surprised her, standing in the cold in his coat. He raised a hand as she passed. She raised hers back, past the Methodist church with its sign that was always changing. Tonight it said, "What you carry shapes you." What you put down frees you. She rode through the center of Millhaven, past the hardware store and the post office and the diner with the light on in the back, past the town hall where 6 people had stood up on a Thursday in November. She rode out the other side. The road opened up into the valley, the hills on either side. The sky above enormous and dark and full of more stars than she had known could fit in a sky before she came here. She rode until the town was behind her, and the valley was around her and the stars were above her, and the engine was the only sound in the world. And then she stopped, because she wanted to, not because she had to, not because someone told her to, not because the road ran out or the money ran out or the options ran out. Because she chose to. She caught the engine. The silence came back in. The wind. The pines. The creek somewhere below moving over its stones in the dark. She sat on the motorcycle at the edge of the valley that Edmund had chosen and watched the stars and let the silence be the silence. Not a void. Not an absence. Just the quiet of a place that had been here long before any of them and would be here long after. She thought about Eleanor, her mother at 18, running, starting over, building a life out of nothing and raising a child in it for 8 years before the years ran out. She had been brave. She had been scared. Both things. All the time. Maya was starting to understand that those two things were not opposites. She thought about Edmund at 43 signing a confession for a crime he did not commit, handing himself over so his daughter could run. And then walking out of prison into a world where his daughter was gone and his granddaughter was a stranger, and the only thing left to do was work and wait and be patient in the long, quiet way that plants wildflowers for someone who doesn't know they're coming. She thought about the 10 letters in the drawer, about what he had wanted for her at 8, at 10, at 12. Not grand things. The texture of a life lived fully in small moments. The kind of things you can only want for someone if you are paying very close attention to who they might become. He had been paying attention. From a distance. In silence. With no guarantee she would ever know. She sat on the motorcycle and looked at the stars and let herself feel all of it without managing it. Without deciding in advance what it was supposed to feel like or how long it was supposed to last. Then she started the engine. And she rode back toward the light at the end of Hollow Lane. Toward the workshop that Edmund had built to last. Toward the tools on the workbenches and the plans in the drawer and the 10 letters on the table. Toward the place that was against all probability and through every possible form of difficulty hers. The garage door was still open when she pulled in. She walked the bike into the center of the workshop, cut the engine, sat for a moment in the quiet. The stove was going. The tools were in their rows. And on the workbench in Edmund's handwriting, strong and slightly slanted, and pressed hard into the paper like he meant every letter, my dearest Maya. She got off the motorcycle, hung the helmet on its hook, put the kettle on, and stayed.